It's Rob!
Tony!
We're in gaming!
And that's you!
Hello inmates and welcome back to the Inn. I'm Rob, of course, or Warshak if you want to call me by my in-game name. And over the past couple days, of course, more One Night in Karazhan cards have been released. I waited till around that 5 or 6 mark, and now we're going to review those cards, and hopefully we'll see something cool, in which we do have something cool. I believe I put it as the last card was the coolest out of the set. But we'll start off with Karazhan. And it says summon a 1/1 candle, a 2/2 broom, and a 3/3 T-bot. Teapot. Not T-bot. It's a 5-drop, and interesting. It reminds me like Beauty and the Beast, kind of. I can see this fitting into a lot of Warlock decks, to be honest, because if it said like summon a 5/5 demon or something like that, that's really not that great, right? But when you're summoning a variety of different cards and they all have different stats, you're able to trade differently to maybe create more value. You also can buff them differently. So let's say the 1/1 candle, you can power overwhelming it, and it actually can kill a 5/5, and you've actually kept your broom and your teapot. On top of that, you're creating a 6/6 worth of creature for 5 mana, because again, we've got the 3/3, the 2/2, and the 1/1. Works well with Defender of Argus and cards that buff adjacent creatures. So I see that definitely being implemented in a deck with this card in it. Anything else that comes to mind when I think of this card? It's cool. It's different. There's not really anything too much like it. I mean, there's cards like, what is it called? The Googly-eyed Octopops, for those of you who are not familiar with the IM. That's Forbidden Ritual, which summons 1/1 tentacles. But that's just how much mana you have, and this is like a preset amount of mana along with differently statted creatures, but it still summons a variety of creatures is what I mean by there. So it's not going too far off the path, but it's still, I think, a cool card at that. And I'm not sure if it'll go into Zoo or what current, or I could see this maybe going into Arena Lock. Because as a one-of, it could be cool just to build up the board. But in Zoo, I think Zoo does a fine job at building up a resilient board. And none of these cards, I don't know if these cards actually have different abilities. I haven't seen that yet. But I think they're vanilla creatures, which means they're not going to have any abilities. So I don't see this card particularly going into Zoo. But I still think it's good, and it'll make its place in some sort of Warlock deck. Pompous, this guy's a 2-drop, 3/2 with Taunt. There's not a whole lot to talk about this guy. I like how he has the Annoyotron's head in his hand. I definitely think this is going to be a decent arena card, as it is a pretty good statted card. It's a 2-drop, 3/2, so you can't really complain there. It does have Taunt, so instead of it, the stats being reversed and it being a Flame Juggler that deals 1 damage, you're reversing the stats and giving it Taunt. There's, again, not really much to say about this guy. He's decently statted. I can see him being played in arena. I would say if he had some sort of like class to him, if he was like a demon or a mech or something like that, there would be some synergies with him. But the fact that he's doesn't belong to any sort of category of card, besides obviously Taunt, I don't really see too much with this guy. So unfortunately, he's just one of those cards that we look at and we're like, okay, that's a card. Moving on. This card, on the other hand, I think Blizzard's trying to push something here. It's a 3-drop, 3/3 called Zoobot Mech, and it says Battle Cry, give a random friendly beast, dragon, and murloc +1/+1. New meta, folks. The beast, dragon, murlocs are coming, and Blizzard is making sure of it. Like, I know this deck is going to be one of the first decks I come across on ladder because of cards like this. And as we've seen before, the Curator, I think, which we covered in part 1, he was the 7-drop, 4/6, draw a beast, dragon, and murloc from your deck. So they're definitely pushing it, and they're making it very obvious that they're pushing this sort of, I don't know if it's going to be a gimmick deck or it's actually going to be a viable deck on ladder, but either way, it's going to be a deck we're definitely going to build. I'm not sure what classes come to mind. Obviously, when we think of beast, we think of hunter. When you think of dragon, you think of maybe priest or warrior, and then when you think of murloc, you think of maybe shaman or paladin. So you're actually like spreading also paladin, dragon, that could work, but it's not, I don't think it's popular as maybe priest or warrior. But anyway, the sort of archetypes that follow each one of these specific, Beast, Dragon, and Murlocs falls on a different class. So, and then we have Mech, of course, which this card is. So, Beast, Dragon, Murloc, Mech. It's going to be a good one, guys. It's going to be a good one. But definitely a cool card, and I like the picture a lot. It reminds me of like a cuter and like not as scary animal, Call the Wild. All right, this guy right here. 3-drop, 3/3 silverware golem. If you discard this minion, summon it. So finally, some discard synergy within the warlock class. I like it, and I like it a lot. The reason being, it's going to maybe push away from the zoo, which you guys know how I feel about zoo. I'm going to try to be less salty about it from now on out when we play on ladder. But for the time being, I still dislike it passionately, but we'll just talk about silverware golem to begin with. So, of course, it works well with cards like Doomguard. It's the first card that comes to mind. Discard 2 cards from your hand. It's got the 5-drop. It's a 5/7 with charge. Yeah, it also reminds me of Fist of Draxus because that card does 4 damage when it's discarded from the hand. You also could pay the, I think, 4 mana cost for it, but essentially you want to discard Fist of Draxus as it does that 4 damage anyway, whether it's played and or discarded. The only problem with that is it's random and it's not targetable, so... It also works on creatures and hero powers, or heroes themselves. But anyway, I think it's a cool card. I like the discard synergy going on here. It also correlates well with the imp we went over in part 2 that said whenever you discard a card, draw a card. So I don't know if that synergizes well with this because you technically didn't discard it. You summoned it at the same time. But I'm assuming it will work with this. Like, you would discard this and then it gets summoned, but then you also draw a card. That's a huge tempo play, by the way. That's pretty good. So we'll see if we can maybe build something like that in the future if they release more discard synergies or more cards that work well with that. And then heading to our last card here, Midi. This guy, it's really cool. It's our first sort of not weapon that we would think of that just, attacks creatures or attacks face. This thing... All right, let's go over the card first, and we'll talk about the weapon, which is like the most important part about this guy. Medivh is an 8-drop 7/7, and he says Battle Cry, equip the Great Staff of the Guardian, and it says the Staff of the Guardian is a 3-drop, 1/3, but the drop doesn't particularly matter too much. It's the stats on the weapon that matters. So it's a 1/3, and it says after you cast a spell, summon a random minion of that cost, lose 1 durability. For example, if we decide we would like to play Firelands, that card that we covered in episode 1 of our review, after you play Firelands, I believe it was a 6-drop, if I'm not mistaken. No, it was a 7-drop, because I think I compared it to Flame Strike. So you paid 7 mana for a spell. Not only is Firelands going to generate you a 5-drop, the staff is also going to generate you a random 7-drop minion. So you've got a lot of tempo coming from this card and a lot of value being created. And you only lose 1 durability, so it works up to 3 spells. Obviously, if you're casting low-cost spells like Arcane Missiles, Arcane Blast, Frostbolt, things like that, maybe you're not creating as much value as if you cast, Flame Strikes or Pyroblast or something like that. But I think what's going to make this card good is when you play the 8-drop and you have, let's say a 4-drop spell in your hand, maybe a 1 or 2-drop, and then maybe another, 1 or 2-drop, you can fill up your board with a decent-sized minions. I don't think it's going to be really comboed with really big spells because that's a lot. You don't want to fill your deck up with high-level creatures like this guy and high-cost creatures like this guy and high-cost spells. But I think a mixture of this guy with some, of course, low to mid-range spells, and then you're going to be able to play a sizable minion the following turn, play, 2 or 3 sizable minions as well, and you also get the effect of course, the spell while summoning creatures. So it's like a summoning stone. He basically summons you a summoning stone for 3 charges. And he can't die unless they have acidic swamp ooze. And then you just cry. But either way, I think it's really cool. The fact that he's neutral is also very interesting. Obviously, if they just made it for the mage class, that'd be kind of biased, right? Because no other classes would get legendaries because there's only a certain amount of legendaries that come within adventure mode. When we do expansions and they release, 140 cards or however many ridiculous cards they release, They have the ability to make a legendary for each class, but in adventure modes, they kind of have to make them neutral and not particular to just one class. So it being a neutral card is very interesting because, we could have Medivh in a warrior deck and, you can start casting your warrior spells and normally you don't get creatures, but now you're generating all this value on top of warrior being a very control-based class. So I think this is going to find itself in mage a lot, but I think it's also going to make its way into a lot of control decks. Because of the value that it generates. So hopefully I've covered everything I need to and I remembered to. If I missed out on anything or anything you guys want to mention in the comment section below for those of you inmates that are looking for even a further detail or maybe a more better explanation or just things that I happen to, miss out on during this video, feel free to leave those in the comment section below. I always enjoy reading what you guys have to say. Even if I can't respond to all of you because there are a lot of comments and there's just one of me, I definitely read all of them. There's not a doubt in my mind. Shouldn't be a doubt in your mind that I don't read your comments. I will, and if I can respond, I do my best. So as always, guys, I'm Warshak, of course, and happy whatever the hell day it is.